Welcome to Brainstorms. Now this fifth episode is all about building tension in a story. I don't know about you, but when I think about tension and pacing in a story or a movie, it can all seem a little bit general at first. On the face of it, what do you essentially have besides parts where there's lots of action and parts where there's a build-up to that action? Surely it's as simple as that. But in my experience, there's nothing quite so powerful as thinking about tension from the inside out. That is, from the internal changes that occur within the characters, especially the protagonist, in response to what's going on around him or her. Use a bit of psychology. In fact, this is one of those aspects of writing that, for me, really crosses over with principles of acting. Now, I was quite heavily into acting in my late teens until I realised I'm way too much of an introvert to cope with that stuff. But still, I've held on to the things I learned back then, and what I couldn't apply to myself very well on stage, I've used as inspiration for my writing. And so can you. So can anyone. So let's get started. A golden rule in acting, which I never quite managed to grasp in my acting skill set, is that your character must almost always be seeming to hold something back. They don't express everything. If they did, it would be too much. It would be like me running down the street screaming my head off whenever I get an annoying email at work. And the streets of Brighton would never be the same again. But people don't do that. People don't act out all the time unless they've really hit a threshold with stress, and that would have involved a long build-up, obviously. And if anyone did that in a film, if characters just said everything that was on their minds and lashed out at every single irritation, it just wouldn't be believable. This holding something back is about realism as well. I believe it's also known as the tip of the iceberg rule. Well, it's quite possible I've just made that up, but whatever. In a film, when you get the sense that the main character isn't saying or showing everything they feel, it creates a sense in which they have an internal life. They're a believable, rounded character, that there's stuff going on inside them that's more than just a reaction to what's going on around them at that particular moment in time. It's a little bit like the mystery aspect I was talking about in the last show on writing around the secret. A while ago, I watched a documentary about filmmaking. There was mention of a horror movie. Now, I don't watch horror movies. I am way too much of a wimp. But thankfully, the programme didn't go into the details of the story itself. And we'll have to just skip the part where I can't actually remember which horror movie they were talking about. Something famous that involved a female actress running around screaming. An actress who found out very soon after having been given the script in the first place that the scenes would have to be filmed in a totally jumbled up order. Some technical issue meant that later scenes needed to be filmed first, and it was all going to happen so quickly that it would be pretty difficult for them to keep track of where they were at in the story in a chronological sense. Now, if you're not a horror movie fan, you might think, if she was just mostly wandering around looking frightened or screaming, whether this really posed much of a problem. But of course it did. She knew, like all good actors know, that variance in tension and pacing is really fundamental no matter what the genre. We can't run at fever pitch constantly. We feel exhausted just watching it. And if the tension's fairly low and doesn't rise or fall very much, well, that's boring. We lose interest. For some reason, it makes me think of a situation where you're given a big workload and you're told that everything in that pile is really, really urgent. Well, great, thanks. That doesn't really help me prioritise, does it? I mean, can you just tell me if some of these pieces of work are just a bit more urgent than the others, and then I can get on with them first, rather than just feeling completely overwhelmed? It's a totally different situation, but somehow it's the same principle. In life, we need variance. I'm going to give an example of a film which might be controversial for some sci-fi fans. The recent Dune movies. I'm not a big sci-fi fan, but I'm happy to try most things that don't involve gore or aren't too scary. I saw the first of the Dune movies a few months ago, and it began with an intriguing atmosphere of tension, a sort of low-medium tension of something brewing just under the surface. You could tell the characters just were holding things back. They weren't quite fully expressing these angers and anxieties that were bubbling just under the surface. It was perfect for a beginning. It really hooked me in. But no matter what happened in the story, what changes occurred, the same atmosphere persisted at that level of tension. By the time the film was halfway through, I was like, for goodness sake, come on! It felt as if nothing had happened, even though plenty had. It was really frustrating, and it wasn't just me being a storyteller and very aware of these things. My hubby too, who is an avid sci-fi fan and has no acting experience, well, that he would confess to me, he has no interest in creative writing either, and he totally agreed with me on this. You cannot sustain that feeling of something's going to happen any minute now, it's going to be big, we're mounting up to it, sometime soon please. I just couldn't finish watching it. My hubby did, but he said there was still just not very much change to the atmosphere, even by the ending. Apparently, the story is meant to continue on into the next movie, but I'm sorry, that's no excuse. Even in a trilogy or a series, a film or a book is a self-contained unit. No matter if there's an overarching plot line that carries through to other episodes, each one must have its own promises fulfilled. Otherwise, why did I just watch that? So set up your expectations, but then deliver. Build the tension, and then bring the story to an actual crescendo. It's not just about tying up loose ends and answering questions that are posed in the plot or revealing the mysteries that intrigued us right at the very beginning. These are all really important, but what I'm talking about now is variance in tension. But how do we do this? Let's go back to that actress in the horror movie that I shamefully cannot remember. I hold up my hand. She'd just found out that the part she'd been learning was going to be filmed in a completely jumbled up order. So she'd have to act out these scenes without any chronological sense of what her character had just been doing seconds ago and where the story was just about to go to. But you know what? It didn't matter, because as a part of her preparation for the role, she'd already made the genius decision to mark up her script as she read it and label different scenes with attention scoring from 1 to 10. I think she must have just looked at it and thought, I need to do more than running around and screaming. So 10 was the highest pitch scream of pure white terror, and 1 was the subtlest hint of something worrying going on. And then there were all the flavours of anxiety, trepidation and fear in between those two. She'd scored the lot in advance according to her own interpretation. So it didn't actually matter which scene the director asked her to act off the cuff. She'd just check her notes and recreate the exact level of tension that she'd already envisaged in her first or second read of it. And So it didn't matter that the filming was jumbled up. The final cut was seamless. Now, what would it be like to try that with one of your own stories, or even a novel? For me, unless it was a really short piece, that would be way too pedantic for me. I just couldn't cope with that. Whenever I've tried to use something like scene cards for a novel, anything too organised, the story very quickly loses its lustre. It feels worn out and overanalysed. But that's just me. For whatever reason, my creativity just doesn't hold up very well under heavy-going structural manipulation. I've always had to step aside a little bit to learn something and then gradually integrate it into my writing techniques. So it becomes a sort of awareness that I have as I write. So if that sounds like you, maybe don't try this at home. Unless perhaps it's a short story, or if you're working on something and you've got really stuck and you suspect maybe there's something wrong with the tension levels. But if you really like these sorts of things and you're super organised, is your writing desk neat? Then I think this could be you. You should see mine. Well, actually no, you really shouldn't. I wouldn't recommend it. But, as with a lot of these things, we can take a piece of this principle and apply it however we want. If it feels like too much to score something that you're working on, as it does for me, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Next time I watch a film, and it's not going to be in the Dune movies, so sorry, I'm going to jot down on a piece of paper a tension scoring between 1 and 10 for each scene. Tension changes within a scene, so maybe I'll draw a line to show each scene change and then put a number just before the line and just after it. But I'll probably also have to write numbers in the midway point between the lines if the tension's changing in the middle of the scene. And then just see what I observe. The fluctuations in tension, the rising and cresting of tension. I think it might be best to try it with something I already know. I might think I know why I enjoy that movie so much, but maybe I'll learn something new about pacing by doing this. It could give me clues as to what fluctuations in tension make a story particularly enjoyable for me, and then I can try and interpret it into my own writing. I suggest doing this exercise with a film just because it's so much easier and quicker to do. In any case, so much writing nowadays is influenced by films and the expectations we have about the way a story should unfold the way that it does in movies. And nowadays, it's just not possible to extricate fiction completely from what goes on in the movies. You could try it with a book. That will be quite a bit longer, a more complex task, but there may be more to learn. But either way, just by trying out this exercise, or just by becoming more aware and more observant of changes in what you read and watch, will in turn surely enrich your own sense of pacing and tension when you write stories and make up plots. You don't have to adopt any pedantic habits. The point is just to enhance your awareness and consider how these principles of what you observe and enjoy in other stories might actually be applied in your own writing style. Stories move in both senses of the word, and sometimes words can move. Words that are scribbled on slips of paper, folded up, may move from the socks of destiny and onto my desk, where they form bizarre sentences and story ideas. That's right, it's time to play Exquisite Corpse. Here goes. Right, the first word I've got is from It's a Twitter ID, gamer writer. Posthumous. Right, time for a noun. This is from Lady Karma. Fox. Posthumous fox. I'm going to grab an action now. Aha, this was from Andy Burrows. Came to realise. Feels like it puts a little bit of pressure on the final words. This is from Dushan Farrington, also known as Quill Spatter. Twangy. What was twangy? This is from Mariah. Kitten. Oh my goodness. The posthumous fox came to realise the twangy kitten. That is truly bizarre. I think I'm going to need some. Some green tea for this. Sorry, I can't share this, but it's got to be done. This is really weird because posthumous means that the originator of that thing has died. So it makes me think that the fox isn't necessarily a fox, it's something that's been made by someone. So it's a painting of a fox or a model of a fox, a mechanical fox that's come to be or come to be known after its maker has died. Came to realise the twangy kitten. I'm not really sure what a twangy kitten is, but maybe again this feels like a model. These are perhaps models made by a toy maker of some kind, or a wizard robot maker, because twangy makes me feel like you can pull the sort of pull something back, like a elastic band part of this kitten, and twang it across the garden or the street. And the posthumous fox came to realise or came to discover this twangy kitten as a fellow creature that's been perhaps escaped from this toy shop. Perhaps there's a history here where the toy maker, having passed away, and his toy shop has just been deserted, or perhaps there was a fire or an accident or something like that, where all of the models that were alive or came alive, perhaps they took on part of his living spirit when he died. They've scattered, but now they're starting to discover each other in the streets or in the countryside, wherever they are. They're starting to recognise each other as half-forgotten comrades of this bizarre life that they'd had when they were being made. I quite like this idea. I do. I think there's something in this. Interesting. I think it's time to try another one. Let's move those slips of paper aside. Right, let's go for a describing word. This is from someone who's called themselves Life is a Gala. Spacious. Okay, I like that. Be interesting when applied to a person or a creature. This is from P-Drone Prompt. It's a Twitter ID. Snow shoveler. The spacious snow shoveler. Okay, then let's give it an action. This is from Alessandro Bozzo. Trudged through the tar pits with. Wow. Okay. Sounds interesting. Next word. This is from Lewis D. East facing. This feels quite geographical already. In fact, each of these is a geographical thing in some way. Let's just try one last word, the noun, and see what happens, because this is full of synchronicity. It's quite bizarre. Right, last word. Life is a Gala again. Minotaur. Okay. Finally a word that isn't to do with geographical things, but no, this is so interesting. The spacious snow shoveler trudged through the tar pits with the east-facing Minotaur. Wow. What is going on here? So, I'm just thinking about tar pits at the moment, just as a starting point. I think that's where, when you have naturally occurring tar, I think that's where it sort of puddles in a hollow in the ground, like it's sort of like where the natural tar rises, and I think that's where you get sort of preserved, very old preserved bones, like you'll find sort of Jurassic bones and things like that preserved in natural tar. That's what I know about tar. It's pretty much everything I know about tar. So, but also at the same time, I'm thinking spacious snow shoveler. I can't help but wonder, is it the snow that is spacious rather than the shoveler? Because a person shoveling, I mean, how can they be spacious? That's just doesn't make any sense to me. But could snow be spacious? I don't know. It makes me think of when you, in a documentary, when you see wildlife, biology, wonders of nature, and they draw right up close with a camera and you see the intricate patterns of snow. Yeah, I could believe that snow is spacious, but only if you're tiny. And if you're a tiny snow shoveler, good luck shoveling that snow. Sorry, I don't really know where I'm going with this. This is all getting a bit confusing, but it's just, I like that. The word spacious is such a puzzle on its own. Such a simple word, and yet it's created this challenge. How can you use that word in front of something that isn't a place? A spacious snow shoveler. Okay, maybe we should just set that aside for a minute so I don't get totally lost down that labyrinth of weirdness. Let's focus on trudged through the tar pits with the east-facing Minotaur. Wow. Something about the fact that the Minotaur is east-facing makes me feel like this could have a religious connotation going on. And trudging through the tar pits, is this some kind of pilgrimage with the spacious snow shoveler? Oh my God. Okay. But still, I am drawn to it. It feels quite serious and quite, yeah, I'd say religious or spiritual, because the Minotaur is quite an ancient feeling mythological creature. And of course, the tar pits contain the bones, the fossilized bones of other ancient creatures. And so I feel like that could be part of the reason why this east-facing Minotaur wants to go there, to trudge through tar pits. Feels like some kind of pilgrimage. But and the snow shoveler, I think that could very easily take on a fresh mythological meaning for me. Just looking at the rest of this, trying to pair up this person with a Minotaur going through tar pits. Something about spacious snow. Something weird going on with the geography of this place that they're in. It's almost as if they're in some kind of geographical underworld where snow originates and where the bones of ancient creatures are held and preserved, and where there's a confusion between, or perhaps no line to be drawn between what's mythological and what's prehistorical. This is a really interesting Exquisite Corpse, and yeah, I would love to spend more time with this, but my tea's getting cold and I feel like I've talked long enough today. I think it feels like it's been quite a long session today. I need to let you know before I go that I've realised I'm going to have to go down to fortnightly with these podcast shows. I hope that's okay with you, and I hope that you'll still continue to have a listen and enjoy these exquisite corpses and the bizarre things that I have to say about inspiration. I hope that that's something that you'll be interested in continuing with on a fortnightly basis. But I've realised that I cannot put the same amount of content together on such a regular basis, and also write stories and novels too at the same time. But anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed the show. I look forward to seeing you next time, well, virtually. And in the meantime, stay well, go forth and be inspired.